Welcome to How It Works, a video series from Law Sites in which you get to see hands-on demonstrations of how legal technology products work directly from the product's developer. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi, and today's featured product is Ironclad, a contract lifecycle management platform used by such innovative companies as L'Oreal, Staples, and Mastercard. The company was named one of the 20 rising stars on the Forbes 2019 Cloud 100 list, and is backed by leading investors including Sequoia, Bond, Accel, Combinator, Lux, and Emergence. To demonstrate the platform, I am joined today by Damon Mino, Vice President of Strategic Accounts at Ironclad. He'll walk us through the product and some of its key features. Damon, welcome to the show and take it away.
Thanks for having me, Robert. As Robert mentioned, my name's Damon. I'm on the sales side, but probably more relevant to what you guys are about to see. And let me go ahead and start sharing my screen so you can see it. I'm an attorney. I practiced for about 7 years in-house. Before that, I was a paralegal and doing what was legal ops before we had a name for legal ops. And one thing that sets Ironclad apart, we think, is that it's really a little bit fine-tuned for that legal persona, whether ops or a practicing attorney, and hopefully you'll get that from the demo I'm going to show you. So what you see right now is our dashboard, and this is just a place where any user can interact with Ironclad, whether I'm requesting a contract, whether I'm negotiating a contract, or whether I'm approving a contract. This is a demo environment, so pretty busy, lots of stuff in here that's never been completed. I can see what's assigned to me, I can see what I'm participating in. But if I want to filter, I can do that too. Maybe I want to see everything that's in the review step, that's, I don't know, an MNDA that was created by me. So easy to do that, easy to get into filtering. Similarly, would be a task management bar to assign it out to your legal team. Now we got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to go really quick and we're going to jump straight into a launch form. So what is a launch form? Launch form is how we generate a contract. And the launch form doesn't just generate the first contract or intake third-party paper. It also captures initial approval. So automating kind of that first step of the legal process where a lot of our customers complain about it being completely manual, where you're getting an email, maybe you're getting a phone call and just saying, hey, can we sign this? Or can you get me a sales agreement? And of course, the person on the legal team, whether it's deal desk or ops or an attorney, has to ask a bunch of preliminary questions that are so rote over and over and over again. Well, we automate all of that. Now, this launch form's for an NDA, so pretty straightforward. But what I want to highlight is we can gather the data to kick off the process from three sources. One, via API. This is using our Salesforce integration. It's just a managed package with Salesforce. In this case, I'm pulling from Salesforce, but of course we could push from Salesforce as well. I could put a button on any object in Salesforce. And interestingly enough, we can tunnel into any field, whether it's on that object or another object. So maybe I'm pulling an email address from a contact that's on an account, but putting the button on the opportunity. So I said there's three ways to get data into this. One is from API. This is from Salesforce, could be from Oracle, could be from anything else. The second way is through the human. So maybe I'm going to expose a few questions to the human who's actually requesting this. So in this case, I want to generate from our template. Of course, I could upload third-party paper if that's the way I want to do it. Maybe I already know that I'm going to want New York governing law, so I choose that. But you'll notice I've got help text here that is guiding the requester through some guardrails. How do I know I don't want to get stuck in the legal black hole? Stay in the guardrails. Don't choose something that isn't recommended. So that's the second way I get data is from, let's say, a human at your organization. But there is a third way. And before I show you the third way, I want to show you a little bit more complex launch form. This is just an NDA, pretty straightforward. Let's look at a vendor agreement or a vendor intake, a very kind of generic intake to start a lot of different agreements for vendor process, for procurement. So maybe I want to get, the counterparty name, but maybe I want to see if there's another agreement that's already in our database that I want to associate with this new agreement. So maybe I know I'm doing business with Damon Demo here, and I've got an NDA that's in place. So I can go ahead and search my database and create a relationship, parent-child maybe. Maybe it's a separate SOW. Not only can I create that relationship, maybe I want to pull data from that previously signed agreement and populate the next agreement. All of that can happen in a launch form. I can also have a lot of nested logic. So if I choose an events agreement, maybe I get new questions. Maybe if I answer a question a different way, I get help text. Maybe if I'm going into a security review question and I know we're sharing data and I haven't got the right vendor security questionnaire, maybe Ironclad is going to ask me for contact information. And then this is the third way we get information. This is just going to shoot an email out to the third party, in this case, the vendor. But in any workflow, it could be a counterparty, but it's getting information from somebody outside of your organization. So they'll get an email. It would, of course, be customized with a logo and a brand and a much more fancy message than this. But now that third party just clicks on a link. They don't have to log into a browser. They don't have to know what Ironclad is. And it just drops them into that same sort of launch form that we saw before. So to recap, in our launch form, we get data from three places: API, through your employees, or from maybe your counterparty. Down here at the end, you're just seeing our e-signature integration. Since we're working off of a template, we can drop all the signature tags into the right place so there's no dragging and dropping, populate the title. We can also, of course, pre-populate through your signature authority matrix. And we can even bring that in from let's say, Workday or HR system through SSO. Before I hit submit, Robert, any questions on the launch side?
Well, just a quick question. You talked about some of the guardrails that you can use in setting up a contract. Are those guardrails pre-programmed? Are those guardrails that you're customizing, working with the client when they're setting up Ironclad?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. They are pre-programmed. You can do them yourself as the client, or we can do them for you. It's up to you. One of our biggest differentiators is everything I'm about to show you, from the launch form to the next phase when we get into negotiation to the repository when we start to extract data from all of this process, can all be configured by the client. We have a no-code interface. It's called Workflow Designer. It's right here. And it allows you to build all these things. And of course, this button may not even be won't be visible to a requester. It would just be through admin settings. But all of this stuff can be customized on the fly. If you start to notice through our reporting, for example, that a certain clause gets negotiated over and over again, maybe you're going to want to expose a question around that to streamline your process.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let me kick this process off. So I'm going to hit submit. And as I mentioned before, the first phase in launch does two things. We're going to draft the initial drafted agreement or intake that third-party paper, and we're going to capture any initial approvals. Now, in this case, it's pretty straightforward. It's an NDA. We didn't go outside the guardrails, so we don't have any approvals. It's just the requester who's in here. But on this screen, this is really sort of the cockpit for negotiation. This is often where legal starts to get brought in, but only when you're brought outside the guardrails. But when legal gets brought in, they need some context. So up here, you've got metadata. Now, in this situation, it's just the answers to those questions we had on the launch form. But if we're working off the client's paper, your templates, we could have other stuff in here, like the indemnity clause, liability cap. Even though you'd never expose that in a question, it can be put on this sort of cockpit view. The other thing down here is an audit trail. And it's pretty boring right now because we just generated the first draft. But as we get going through this demo, you're going to see it populate with approvals, with red lines from the counterparty, etc. And then finally, we've got the agreement itself. Before I click into it, I'm going to share it with my counterparty, and I can do that two ways. I can, of course, download it, PDF or Word. I can use our email integration to share it, and there's benefits to either. If I download it and I want to keep it in my own chain and I don't want them to see anything about Ironclad, I can still copy that email chain into this audit trail. And our attorneys love that because they want to stay in their own email. They want to stay in Word, for example, and we make that very easy. We integrate with email. We integrate with Word. We don't make you replace either. But to show you our out-of-the-box email feature, let me just show you what that looks like. So I could send an email to my Gmail account, pretend I'm the counterparty here, and I'm just going to send myself that first draft. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to notice in the audit trail, I see that it's been sent. I'm going to be able to track whenever that counterparty opens that email. And then more importantly, when the counterparty decides to reply to that email, anything they send me is going to automatically brought in. So let's check my Gmail. So here's the email I just got from Ironclad. But you'll notice it's a Word attachment, right? We're not forcing the counterparty to log into anything. Again, I don't have to use this. I could have used my own email thread and just CC'd Ironclad into it, but this is what our emailer looks like. The benefit of using our emailer is now when the counterparty replies to this, and I took the liberty of go ahead and redlining a draft of that NDA earlier, and of course I named it my own naming convention, as a counterparty does. Please see my edits. And I send this back. The benefits of using our email feature is one, as I mentioned before, you're going to be able to see when the recipient starts to interact with it. And if we wait a few seconds, we're going to get that reply email dropped right back into this audit trail. There it goes. So here it is. If this was a long email chain, that whole chain would be brought into the audit trail as well. And I can decide to just add this attachment into my workflow. And when I do, I'm going to replace the existing document, and I'm going to replace it as a new version of that NDA. But you'll notice here, I could bring in additional documents. If there's additional attachments, we can do all of that. So I'm going to replace that, and a couple things are going to happen. First of all, we've versioned the agreement. Second of all, we've changed the naming convention to your naming convention. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go into Word and edit all of that. The third thing we do is we tunnel out to whatever cloud storage provider you care to use, and we create a folder structure. We create a naming convention, and we start saving copies into your cloud storage environment. And then we also save it to our repository. So it's built-in document retention. Now, you're going to notice that I've got a comment here that came from my counterparty, but it doesn't look like they made any red lines. I'm going to assume that they were rude, and I was as the other counterparty. So I'm going to use my own redlining feature and see what they actually did. Aha! They removed independent development, and it looks like they updated their name. Okay, that part's reasonable. This part's just unreasonable. And as they put in their comment, they even told me that they were unreasonable. All right, so I've now...
Damon, are you in a doc editor there or just a viewer?
I'm glad you asked, because that's what I'm about to get into. Right now, it's a viewer, but if I pop up to this button, now we're going to jump into an editor. And as I mentioned before, we make it easy for the folks working on this, usually attorneys, could be someone else, to live where they want to live. They can download and start working in Word, or they can use our in-app editor. Anything I do in either environment will automatically integrate with each other. I'll tell you, as an attorney, I'm the type of guy that likes to print, get my trusty red pen, write it all out, then spend a lot of time redrafting it back in. I don't do that anymore. I just use this editor. And the reason I do it is it's got features of collaboration that I love about Google Docs, but also everything that I love about Word. So what do I mean by that? Down here, here's those red lines that the counterparty made. Maybe I want to highlight this section. And maybe I want to send a comment to somebody else in my organization. So I'm going to play a lot of roles here. Pretend there's a third Damon out there, and I'm going to say, please approve. And you'll notice I didn't say, please approve the fact that they removed independent development. I'm just going to say, please approve. And then down here, I'm going to say, note, we're also in New York, to the same guy, Damon. In New York, Gump. So that's an internal comment. You may notice that little internal sign. Separately, we've got this other comment that says external, and that's from the counterparty. I can reply to this guy and I can say, I noticed you were unreasonable. So now we've got two different types of comments going on, internal comments and external. And this is where I think our editor starts to do some cool things. It's kind of the best world of Google Docs, but also the best world of Word. If I want to edit, I can also edit in here. And I don't have everything in Word, but I've got a lot of the features in Word, including starting to add new tables, new sections, etc. But let's say I save this. New version. And as I save it, a couple things are going to happen. One, those comments that I made that were internal are going to be sent to Damon. And when those comments are sent to Damon, again, pretend now I'm an executive, maybe I'm my general counsel. they're going to get one email. And in that email, they're not going to just get my very vague comment about please approve or New York governing law. They're going to get this entire section and my comment. So they'll get full context in one email. And that's really helpful for executive approvals. Separately, because I made two different types of comments here, internal and external, if I ever download this as a Word document, I get a flag here from Ironclad saying, hey, you've got internal comments in that. Since you're downloading it, I may assume you're about to share it externally. So it warns me and it strips out those internal if I so choose. So now when I share this externally, that's got rid of that. The same thing happens with that email feature I showed you earlier. If I want to strip out those red lines, it will. And let me show you one last feature about this before we get to the repository. Now that we've made a couple of different versions, let's say I'm going to send this again back to that counterparty. But I want to include something a little bit more advanced, not just the last version. I want to make this a red line. So I'm going to include version 4, but not to version 3. I'm going to go all the way down to version 1. And as you're noticing here, it's easy as just grabbing some clicks and downloads. And this is really helpful if, let's say, you're in version 14 and you've got multiple internal counsel working on a document. You've got IP counsel, you've got commercial counsel, maybe marketing's in there. And so when you now send a draft back out to the counterparty, it's really easy to send different versions. I can save that as a docx. I'm going to also send them version 4 as a clean docx, and I'm going to send them version 4 as a PDF. So with a few clicks, I've now sent a complete signature packet for them. In the old days when I was a paralegal, this was like a 10-minute affair fraught with danger if I attached the wrong thing, and that's a pretty stressful situation to be in. So that's another nice feature of using our email integration.
That's a great feature. I love it.
And that's what I want to highlight. There's a lot of little Easter eggs here. I won't be able to show all of them, but we really try to capture the persona of the legal environment. Last thing I want to show before we jump to the audit trail, here's that repository. It's getting really rich now. We're starting to see everything that's happening. If I want to call in other people into this negotiation, it's easy for me to just start typing at mentions. And for large organizations, you mentioned L'Oreal. With L'Oreal, we're at 17 different countries. You can fine-tune what these at mentions reach out to, meaning maybe for an NDA in Singapore, it's only going to look at these section of employees. Maybe for a procurement agreement, these other ones. Maybe for HR, these other folks. So you can get really fine-tune who gets to invited into collaboration. The one thing I didn't show you is approvals. It's pretty straightforward. As you start to create rules in the workflow, we can automatically bring in teams, individuals, parallel approvals, sequential approvals, pretty straightforward stuff. Any questions on that, Robert?
No.
Cool. So let me just approve this thing, and we're going to skip ahead to the repository. But before we do that, this is our email integration. And the nice thing about the e-signature integration, nice thing about that is you don't have to now pop out into DocuSign or Adobe Sign, upload, drag or drop. The same features that are in DocuSign are just being tunneled through our API. So here I could, for example, change my signing order. I can make it sequential or parallel. I can move them around however I want to. I can update the signer. I can even create a coordinator. And so you can assign this to a third party who's going to own your own internal e-signature. And of course, if they partially sign, I can do that. I can upload a wet signed agreement and still capture the other signature and e-signature if I want. All right, let's jump into the repository. So everything I showed you hopefully highlights the clean UI, how easy it is for both requesters and negotiators to interact. But the real power of Ironclad is what I'm about to show you. Because we made it easy for the contract to be kicked off and to be negotiated, we capture all the metadata in the negotiation process automatically. There are a lot of powerful repositories, but they all fall down because some human has to be in the loop to keep constantly updating the metadata information. Well, this is all getting captured automatically, and this view is completely customizable for reporting. So Here I see the name of the agreement. I see the counterparty name. I see what type of agreement it is, the date. A few of these have some parent-child relationships that I'll show you in a moment, but I can customize it. So let's say I'm privacy counsel and I want to create a view that's just about DPAs. So I'm going to start looking for data center stuff. Maybe I want to know what the SLA is, what the data center location. So I'm simply adding columns to my view. But, NDAs, order forms, they're not going to have metadata on these points. So let's narrow this down to a DPA. Now we're starting to see this information start to get filled out. Not only can I change the columns, I can start to create the filters. So all of these filters and all of these columns are just metadata that you're tracking in your particular agreements and workflows. And through permissions, I can decide who sees what. And that means you can delegate access to the repository to, let's say, the sourcing team, and they'll only set a set of agreements, but they may only see a set of agreements and may only see a set of fields to track around. But that means they can create their own special report for a certain type of agreement with certain columns, maybe within a date range, maybe within a dollar range. Maybe I want to add a filter around, non-standard payment terms, and track about whether that has occurred or not. And all of that will start to change my view. In a DPA, that's obviously not relevant. As I customize those views, I can share them with other people and I can save them. So I've saved one for DPA search. You'll notice this is just DPAs. It's got all those columns. My repository of 600 and some documents is now down to 160. Great. This is my report for DPAs as a data counsel. But I can also now start to layer in free text search. So let's say something's happened. Let's say there's a data breach. And I remember there was somebody I negotiated with that has some pretty onerous audit rights and written notice requirements. So I'm going to search for 3 days written notice. And as I do this, it's searching across everything in my previous save search, but it didn't narrow everything down. So what happened? Well, Ironclad's looking for each of these words because we're full Boolean as well. So if I put quotes around this, now the search is looking for that phrase. All of a sudden, those 160 DPAs are down to 4. I realize, yep, it's that squirrely Damon guy. He's the guy who's got that notice provision. And if I click into the agreement, I want to show you something cool. But before I click in, this is a nice feature as well. It's a preview, and it's really helpful for non-attorneys and attorneys as well. Maybe I don't want to click into the agreement to read everything about it. I get a quick preview. I get to see the metadata that this particular document type these metadata terms are relevant to. I can see if there's any parent-child relationships. I can even see who's got access to it. But back to the story about the data breach. Since I've found this document, since I've searched for this phrase, I want to click into the document and make sure it's the one I'm thinking about. And sure enough, it is. This is highlighted in yellow. It's that phrase, 3 days written notice. So when I click in, it's brought me straight to that clause. I look at it, and sure enough, that's the guys who've got the audit terms. And since this one-off has happened, I want to add that as a metadata term. And so I can create a new property. It's just going to be a notes section here. And I can say, data breach occurred. And whatever I type in here is also going to be free text searchable in the future. I can also click into any document or repository and see that full audit trail. So this is just a demo document, but in a real life, you'd see, hey, who approved that 3 days written notice? And you'd be able to figure out, exactly what happened. All right. So last thing I want to show you is two things. We can upload any document from a repository, and we do have an AI feature. So I've got some real agreements here, but they've been scrubbed to remove the names of the guilty. And what happens when I bring in these fully executed agreements, PDFs, is we're going to OCR them completely. And then we're also going to look for metadata that we care to automatically capture with our AI. We've got a partnership with Google, and the benefit of that partnership is we can find common terms, not crazy custom terms, but very, very common terms without any training of the algorithm. Because Google has such a huge data set, they've essentially pre-trained an algorithm for certain clauses. So you'll notice here, I've got a document and I've got these common clauses on the side. And if I click on any of these clauses, it brings me to the section of the agreement where it is, and it allows a human to be in the loop and say, yep, that is the agreement term. Where's the governing law? Yep, that is the governing law. And so I can check that as a checkbox and import the document into the repository. Very last thing is Workflow Designer. I mentioned that everything I do here is easily created by somebody without any coding experience. So I'm going to pop into that NDA that I just demoed for you. And this is the behind the scenes. This is how we've created the workflow. It's as easy as grabbing the text that you want to modify, maybe assigning it to a metadata field that already exists, or creating an absolutely new field. Deciding what kind of field that's going to be. It then turns that field into a question on your form builder. You decide how you're going to add help text. You're going to decide what's the input you're going to get on that question. You can, of course, move it around wherever you want. And then if you want to create conditionality, you remember we had this region. It's as easy as adding more regions to it and creating rules around those regions. So I can create a new rule, and then once I've created the rules, I can create approvals for those rules, assign them to individuals or groups. And those same approval rules can be done with e-signature, or we can port it all in from your existing e-signature authority matrix.
Damon, really, thanks a lot. That was a really interesting and fast-paced overview of Ironclad. I really appreciate you being able to go through that so quickly. Viewers, I hope you found that helpful. Damon, thanks a lot for doing that today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Take care.